Welcome to the Talk About Talk podcast. I am so excited about this episode. A couple of months ago, I was speaking at a conference and I met one of the other conference speakers who you are about to meet. Her name is Michèle Boudria, and she's the recently retired CEO of McDonald's Canada. She started 4 decades ago working front cash at McDonald's and worked her way up to CEO. She has an incredible story to share with you. My name is Dr. Andrea Wojnicki, and I'm your executive communication coach. Here at Talk About Talk, I focus on coaching ambitious professionals like you to improve your communication skills so you can achieve all of your career goals. You can find more about what I do if you go to talkabouttalk.com. On the website, you'll find the archive of this podcast, you'll find a free newsletter, you'll find free resources, you'll also find information about the private coaching, the masterclasses, and the corporate workshops and keynotes that I run.
At McDonald's, it's actually not that unique to have grown your entire career and started in our restaurants at the front cash or in the kitchen or drive-through or whatever it may be. We have quite a few colleagues around the world who have taken a similar path. You maybe don't always make it to CEO, but you certainly take on some very important roles in the business. What I attribute my success to, it kind of boils down to 3 things for me. One is grit. I am a firm believer in the power of going after something and never stopping until you achieve it. Now, I certainly wasn't thinking I'd be CEO when I started, but every task, every responsibility that I was given, I had to make sure that I was the best at it, that I achieved it to its full potential. So I'd say that would be one of the first things. Curiosity was probably the other one. I know that I probably drove a lot of my bosses crazy. I had millions of questions all the time. If I didn't quite know how to do something, but I thought, that looked kind of interesting to be responsible for that, I'd ask a million questions to the point where they'd say, okay, you just take over and try it and see how well you do with it. And so curiosity to me was really, really important. And I'd say the last was more around how do you surround yourself with the right people who are going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly from a feedback perspective. And so I call that my personal board of directors. And I have over the years had some really, really, really close partners who some are still really good friends today and continue to be part of my personal board of directors. But many have come and gone. But I'm really grateful that I had those types of people around me who gave it to me, like I said, good, bad, or ugly.
Oh gosh, I have so many things I could say here. First of all, I love that you're using the power of 3. I mean, you could list one thing or you could list 10 things and you're like, no, here are the 3 things. So grit, curiosity, and people. So your personal board of directors. I talk a lot on the Talk About Talk podcast about the power of a growth mindset, which I think is related to your second point. Well, actually, maybe to all of it, but mostly to your second point and curiosity. I'd love to dig into the third point because I get a lot of questions about networking and how to create a high quality network around you, especially ambitious folks like yourself, like most people that are listening here. This idea of a personal board of directors comes up in conversation. Can you talk a little bit about how that unfolded and if you have any advice for people on how to do the same?
Yeah, I think how it unfolded is I actually attended this workshop, for women in leadership roles at McDonald's. And this woman kind of introduced the concept to us. And I was really kind of drawn towards the idea of building that. And it was literally not an interview process where I interviewed folks, but I put down the names that I thought would fit the various roles and the various type of feedback I was going to receive or need. And to be perfectly frank, it has evolved over time because I might have been looking for different type of feedback, or if I didn't interact with someone for a long time because our roles were so far apart or our worlds were so far apart, at times I would change up and get different folks to help out. I firmly believe, over the years, I've had the pleasure of receiving this really rich feedback. And sometimes it doesn't feel like a pleasurable experience, but I have been really lucky. And I'll never, forget, I was really, really young. I was 25 years old. I was leading a team of about 100 people. And I had around me a lot of really strong business men. And the behavior and the leadership style was very much one of, ruling with a bit of an iron fist. And so that's what I thought was going to make me successful. And so, at some point in my period as leading this team, I received some pretty harsh feedback, and people did not enjoy working with me. Well, the funny thing is I wasn't really enjoying myself either. And so, I really took that to heart. I had reflected on it quite a bit, and I decided that, I was the kind of person who really cared about people. I was the kind of leader or wanted to be the kind of leader that was kind to people and motivated people and got people excited about vision and strategy and really wanting to give their best self. And I realized that doing that with an iron fist wasn't working for me. And so I basically woke up one morning and said, that's it. I am going to be who I am, the leader I want to be in the style that I want. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, well, maybe this just isn't for me and somewhere else it will work. And many, many, many years later, I look back and I think, thank goodness that leader that I worked with at the time had the courage to give me that really harsh feedback. And I applaud my team at that time for also being honest and speaking out. And by the way, they didn't tell me because they were afraid of me. They told someone else. And that was also very eye-opening. And so it has worked for me. And this is who I am. I'm proud of it. It's how I've led teams for all these years. And, it's the legacy that I've left at McDonald's in my retirement is I've taught other leaders that you can be kind, but still be confident and still be demanding and still achieve really great results. You just do it in a different way.
Wow. Okay. I want to get into leadership style, but before we go there, I want to go back and kind of close the loop on the networking, and you use the term feedback a lot. So it sounds like you were looking for mentorship, and you mentioned the word roles. So as you were creating what eventually became your personal board of directors, what was your, I guess, tactical strategy? What were you thinking? Who do I need? What types of people, what role will they play?
Yep. And I think your boss always plays a role. And that obviously will change with whomever you're reporting into. So that was clear. The boss was one of those folks. And I would always my strategy for each one of these roles was to say, listen, here's what I'm really ambitious. I want to achieve a lot. I have got lots of potential and I want to be able to pursue everything that I want to pursue. But I know I can't unless I'm given really honest feedback. So this is me asking you and giving you permission to be very, very transparent and honest and timely with me when you see something. And so I'm not sure that I necessarily accepted it exceptionally well every single time, but I would go home, reflect, sleep on it, come back in the morning and think, you know what? That was good feedback. I just need to accept it. I've asked for it. Now I must deal with it. There's some folks that will play more of an ally role, right? So that could be a peer. It could be someone who's got some similar thoughts as mine. And so in a meeting, we might strategize a little bit so that we can deliver some strong messages together. I'd have obviously supporters, and those supporters, they talk about you when you're not in the room. And there are people who believe in what you believe in and want to do, and they don't necessarily have a direct connection to you, but they're influential and they're in the room and they're making a difference for your career in these conversations. And then, of course, mentors. Mentors have always been part of my board of directors, and sometimes I've had more than one. Sometimes I have one that's specific to a topic because this person is an expert at this and I really want to draw out as much as I can from that person on this particular topic.
So when I read about kind of strategic networking, and by that I don't mean being manipulative, I mean like thinking like you did about carefully in a disciplined way about the roles of different people in your network that are influencing your career. I hear about mentors. And also, there's so much research about how a champion or an advocate can positively influence your career. The one thing that I heard you say, in addition to these two roles, is the power of allies. And I think many of us don't, maybe we naturally might side with certain people, feel a connection with people, but I think that's a really nice add, right? It's not just mentors. And it's not just the champions, it's also allies.
Yeah, and think about what that also does in the workforce. When you start to create an environment where you're looking for allies in your workforce, the competitiveness is still there. A lot of these folks were my peers, but it becomes so healthy because you're each other's ally. And so you want what's best for both, for yourself and for that individual. And it really creates this really strong culture.
I think that may be something that stands out about you compared to, I haven't heard people articulate that so clearly. The other thing that I'm hearing quite clearly and consistently, Michèle, is your focus on feedback. And I talk about this all the time. I've received in the last, 6 years as I've been doing Talk About Talk podcasts and workshops, twice I've received emails from people saying, Andrea, are you open to hearing feedback? And when I get that email, so I usually do say, please run a survey after, please share the results with me. I say feedback is a gift, and I really do mean that. But every now and then someone will say, are you open to feedback? And then I'm like, this is not going to be fun, but yes. And it's like, we have this natural human instinct to look for flattery and compliments. And when it is constructive criticism, it's really, really hard. Do you have any advice for people on how to get over that? It's not easy.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I think it's in our human instincts is to focus on what, along with the direct feedback that's not so pleasant and positive, you generally get some constructive feedback. And for some reason, all we focus on is that piece. And so, I always tell folks, listen to it, absorb it, think about what one or two things you might do differently moving forward, and then put it on a shelf. Because you can't constantly be thinking about that every time you're talking, acting, moving, writing an email, because then it consumes you. And you will also then don't even recognize all the great things that people have said about you. And so I love the fact that we run a lot of assessments on people and psychoanalyze leaders and so on and so forth. But with that is some very, very rich feedback. And you can get really caught up on one element of it and lose sight of all of the great things that have also been said. So one or two quick things you're going to change, put it on the shelf, read the good stuff, move on.
Okay. And the good stuff may inform something that I talk about a lot, which is your personal brand or your professional identity, right? Those are the things that you want to reinforce, that you want to be known for, and that ultimately become part of your leadership style. And I think the span of your career really covered a massive paradigm shift. I always think of the Jack Welch GE era where it was like authoritarian leadership and here's how you do the command and control style to improve productivity and results and blah, blah, blah. And it was like this, I guess, assumption that people had that if you were friendly or, God forbid, maternal in your interactions at work, that you were weak and you were not results oriented. And there's definitely been a shift where the people are now criticizing that authoritarian paradigm and focused on things like psychological safety, taking risks, being authentic. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with, first of all, do you agree that has been a paradigm shift and your observations there?
Yeah, it's definitely a paradigm shift because it's now an expectation of the workforce. If you do not shift, you're going to struggle to build the workforce you want or the best of the best in the workforce to have them come and work for you. I live by this statement. People say it describes me to a T. Is I say, do not mistake my kindness for weakness.
Oh, I love that. So good.
And that is really what I believe was that kind of unlock when I was 25 years old, was I realized that I could be kind and strong and confident and successful. And so there's a couple of things I think, from my leadership style. Being confident, but not arrogant is probably one of the most important steps now. There is an expectation now of our workforce that we show up in a way that is absolutely confident. People won't follow you if you're not leading with confidence, but they certainly will not follow you if you lead with arrogance. It's just not something the workforce today will accept. I also say spend time, invest time in getting to know the people who work for you. That matters more today than it ever has. People want to know that you want to know about their families, their schools, their hobbies, their pets, their likes, their dislikes, their career ambition. Once you establish that kind of relationship and they've seen how much you've invested in them and how much time you've spent just getting to know them and not necessarily talking about the business, then the world is your oyster, because then you can ask for just about anything. And that's where I believe this like virtuous cycle of high performance comes into play, where when I have seen myself create a relationship with someone that is so deeply rooted in me getting to know them and spending that time with them, I can ask them just about anything. And the last thing they want to do is disappoint me. And so they go above and beyond anything I would have ever expected. Then I get to recognize them and reward them for incredible work. And then together we set new heights as far as what we can achieve. And then it becomes this like incredible flywheel where you're actually getting better and better results. And then other people want to join this because they see the success, they see the rewards, they see the appreciation. And it creates this culture of high performance that I, have prided myself over the last, several decades of making sure that I created. And I go to work thinking this is one of the easiest jobs ever because people just want to do more and they just want to do well. People always said to me, Michèle, we just never want to disappoint you, but we know if we do, it's not the end of the world. We'll fix it and we'll move on. And that to me was the epitome of leadership, I think. And we achieved great things together. And I was really proud of the team. But along with that comes a lot of honesty, right? Some real deep rooted conversations around feedback. And because you have such strong relationship, you set it up and you say, listen, I want you to be successful. And to be successful, I think you're going to need me to be really transparent with you when I see an opportunity. Do you give me permission to do that? And then the answer is always yes, because they know it's going to come from a place of kindness, but not a place of weakness.
So as you're sharing all of these things that you thought about, that you think about, it's becoming pretty apparent how your success happened. I wanted to double down on two of the things that you said. One was it's confidence is a requirement. I say that too. I was just teaching a group about this last night and we were talking about how if you're not confident, you can't establish credibility. And people only follow people that are confident and credible, but not arrogant. So specifically, how did you prevent yourself from slipping into that arrogant territory? And if you notice someone who was reporting to you who might be, they start off as a little bit more anxious and then they build up their confidence and then it just keeps going into arrogant territory. What would you tell them, or what were you thinking about to prevent that from happening?
Yeah, I'd say sometimes it happens and you don't even notice it, right? So that's why you've got to have those great people on your board of directors who kind of remind you that it's happening. But I think if you surround yourself with the right people, I'm a firm believer that my job as a CEO of McDonald's Canada was to have smarter people than me at the table surrounding me. And when you actually firmly believe that, you don't just say it, but you actually believe it, it's really easy to be confident because you know you've put the right people at the table. But it's really hard to be arrogant because most of them are smarter than you. And so my job was never to be the most, knowledgeable financier or real estate rep, or that's why you surround yourself with the best of the best in the industries, in the functions that you require to run your business. The art of being a really strong leader is the ability to be able to do that. And people will only work for you if you are confident, but not arrogant. And it's easy not to be arrogant when you know that there's people who know more than you do around the table about their particular piece.
It goes back to what you said about curiosity. And also, if you're genuinely curious, then you're not arrogant, right? Like arrogant people think they know everything.
One of the things that I realized I did all the time, and it's funny, I never even thought of it, but the team would say to me it's so helpful when you do that because it gives permission. As a CEO, of course I had lots of opinions and I had lots of thoughts on how we might do things and do them better and so on and so forth. And when I would make a statement and I would realize that I was making a statement that could carry a lot of weight and that people might just take and run with, when I was done, I'd always say, Does that make sense? Or is anybody thinking about it differently?
Wow. Yeah.
And so, because what you need to realize very quickly is that, when you take on this kind of a role, any leadership role where you have a team of people who are looking to you to set direction, vision, strategy, what you say carries a lot of weight, but you may not always have it right. And so you have to create this environment where you might make a statement where you might want to create a certain expectation, but you got to validate that it's right. And so, what it did is it just created this environment where I could push the envelope really, really far sometimes, often. But the team would then, say, well, we need to think about this and we might want to reflect on that. And then we would probably get to the sweet spot of where that should be. But they were given permission and there was an environment where they were expected to provide a point of view on my point of view. And that takes time and trust and patience because it's not automatic because you ask the question that they're actually going to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds as if you have exceptional self-awareness, Michèle. You're conscious of the fact that how you respond to their questions, maybe the risky comments the self-perceived risky comments that they're making when they're questioning something that you're recommending or suggesting, your response to those things has a significant impact on the moment, but really also on the culture, right?
Yeah. And I didn't always get it right. The importance of self-awareness and transparency. But again, when I didn't, most of the time I knew I didn't. And, I would take a deep breath, walk around the building, come back and say, all right, let's chat about it. Where did I go wrong there? And find the person on the team who was in that place of trust and comfort to be able to say, yeah, maybe that wasn't, the way we should have handled it or whatever it may be. But acknowledge it and correct it. And all that does is goes back to it builds that credibility because you're confident enough to come back and acknowledge you didn't get it right.
Right. And encouraging them to do the same thing.
And role modeling that is so critically important.
Oh, Michèle, it sounds like such an inspiring work environment that you cultivated. You mentioned the word transparency, and previously you were talking about, asking people about their family and schools and so on. I'm wondering if you've thought at all strategically about, authenticity versus transparency. And there's this kind of adage that happened, I guess, after COVID, during COVID, people were saying, I should be bringing my whole self to work, or we should be able to bring our whole selves to work. Are you bringing your whole self to work? And how that relates to transparency and authenticity and your thoughts on that?
I believe it's important you create an environment where people can do that. People are at their best when they can be themselves. And I reflect back on that 25-year-old who said, I'm not happy being that iron fist leader either. So why don't I just be who I am? And if it's good enough, then it'll be successful. And if it's not, then maybe this isn't for me. And I firmly believe in constantly creating this environment where people can just be who they are. I've seen people kind of come out of their shell and just do amazing things for the business and for their career when they're led by someone who they feel really comfortable with and know that they won't be judged. Now, that doesn't mean I always agree with everybody's points of view. It doesn't mean that, we didn't have debates and disagreements and really strong discussions, but done in a respectful manner. And at the end of the day, there are times where I had to make decisions that weren't popular, that not everybody agreed with. But if you take the time to listen to everybody's points of view, you demonstrate some empathy, you sit in their seat for a minute and you say, what might be their reaction to this? And if you're able to look them straight in the eye and say, listen, I thought about what this might feel like for you or for, a group of folks. And here, let me explain why I'm thinking that this is still the right decision for the business. We were running a business, right? And so it still needed to be successful. And to be successful, sometimes you have to make really hard decisions. But if people knew that in the end, they were allowed to express themselves, their points of view, and show up in their authentic way, whether they got their way or not mattered a heck of a lot less because at least they knew I respected them enough to be able to hear them out, get their point of view, live in their shoes for a minute prior to making a decision. and then going forward and making the decision that was required for the business.
Yeah. It sounds like you're so skillfully walking that fine line between like personal but not personal. I mean, business is business. The business is about working with people, and back to like getting to know your family, the schools, the community that you live in, what you care about, and knowing that I respect your personal advice, the advice from you about whatever the business decision is. But then ultimately, the decision that Michèle is making is to achieve the business goals. So, wow. I wish I'd been a fly on the wall. I wish I'd been an employee back then. So I want to shift gears. All of our careers to some extent are in transition, but you're currently experiencing a transition where you retired from this position of CEO of McDonald's Canada, and now you are doing corporate board work. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice for the listeners about how to narrate in an effective way career transitions. I have a feeling that this is something that you would be very conscious of.
Yeah, get help. There are actually professionals out there who do this really, really well. And so I've always had a professional coach, and she is, one of my members of my personal board of directors for many years now. And she's probably my most honest, feedback provider that I have. And she's amazing. And obviously, she works with a lot of companies and CEOs and boards. And so obviously she has real live examples and lots of advice to offer. So she's, really important. But I've also worked with someone else who's just helped me think differently about my resume, my bio, how I show up on LinkedIn, all of those things. There are professionals out there who can help you transition, because when you're in a role of CEO or any leadership role, you're busy. You don't necessarily have a whole lot of time to think about what does this next chapter look like. You get in that next chapter, and that's when you can dedicate some time for that. And as a CEO, I wasn't on a whole lot of boards because I was so focused on our business. So I had a couple of boards that I sat on, but to be perfectly honest with you, now is a whole other world and something that I want to jump into. And they have been extremely helpful. And just last week, I was talking to a young man who wanted some advice on how does he prepare for this. He's new in business, but he wanted, and I said, listen, there are classes, there are courses, that you should be looking into. Meet with people who have successfully joined boards like the ones that you're interested in the future, and set yourself up. And some of it, you talked about networking earlier, a lot of it is around networking as well. And, in some ways, I wish I'd invested a little bit more in networking. And in other ways, I'm just being smart about how do I leverage the network that I have today to continue to build on it. And, good things will come, I have no doubt. But yeah, it takes a lot of preparation. And again, I just surrounded myself with people who knew how to do it really well and took the time to listen to their advice.
I have to say, Michèle, these board positions that you're going to land or that you have landed are exceptionally fortunate. I can imagine you sitting around the boardroom table asking the really important questions and even kind of helping to optimize the culture, I guess, of the board and of the organization. So I can't wait to see what you do next. But now's the time for me to ask you the 3 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am.
Question number 1. Actually, I don't know the answer to this one. I've now met you virtually and in person, but I'm not sure. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
So it's changed, I think, over the years. And so I think professionally, I'm more extroverted, but not necessarily by choice. My role had, me kind of in the spotlight all the time. And so one that I just embraced and worked on. But what it did is it led me to become very introverted in my personal life. Needed a lot of quiet time to recharge. And so the folks around me professionally would never say I'm introverted, but the people in my life personally would tell you absolutely there's definitely some introversion there for sure.
I appreciate how you are distinguishing between where I get my energy clearly is solitude, recharging through solitude, right? But that doesn't mean, on the other hand, that you don't have an energetic presence. Okay, question number 2. What are your communication pet peeves?
I think people giving me the answer they think I want to get rather than what they're really, really saying or thinking. And to me, if I'm asking you, it's because I really want to know what your thoughts are. But I also recognize that it takes time. You have to be patient and create that environment where people feel that way. But if I'm asking, it's because I really want to know. And so feel free to tell me. And I think I can kind of see through that when I'm talking with people. And I sometimes will just say, stop. I know you're thinking differently. I don't want to hear what you think I want to hear. I want to hear what you really think.
So good. So good. Okay. Last question. Is there a podcast or a book that you find yourself recommending lately to people in your network?
I mean, Talk About Talk podcast. Of course.
Other than Talk About Talk.
Okay, got you. Yeah, you know what? I started with this. If you've never read the book Grit from Angela Duckworth, I would recommend it. I love the idea that grit is twice the indicator of success and intelligence. And, this idea also kind of goes well with, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to bring the smartest people around you to be successful. And this concept of, grittiness and really working, until you try and try and try again until you're successful, to me has really been an unlock in realizing that it was okay not to be that smartest person in the room. It just needed to be really gritty. And that, I think, has attributed a lot to my success. I had the opportunity to meet Angela Duckworth and listen to her speak about her work. And ever since then, I've been fascinated by this book. And I go back to it. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll read a chapter because I don't quite remember exactly everything in the chapter, but I know there's a nugget in there that I think I can use. And I think everybody that I meet ends up buying the book because I'm like probably her number one cheerleader for this book. I just love the book itself, but the idea behind it.
So I have to say, Michèle, that you come across as someone who truly exemplifies the grittiness and the growth mindset that she advocates. It's very evident and it's very impressive and inspiring. I want to say thank you for joining us. And is there anything else you want to share with the Talk About Talk listeners about optimizing their communication, their leadership style as they navigate their own careers?
I think the last thing I would just say is this world is rapidly changing. The workforce is rapidly changing. And assessing and adapting your leadership style is going to be more important than ever. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's, you've done something wrong. It's simply taking the time to assess it. And you're likely not going to need an overhaul. You're probably just going to need some tweaks. But the smart and incredibly successful leaders out there do that regularly. And they surround themselves with people who give them the honest feedback that allows them to identify where those opportunities are. So if you are not doing that exercise of reflecting on how do I need to adapt, I would suggest that that's something you really incorporate into your annual thinking and planning and strategizing every year. At the very least, give it some thought, see if there's anything. But the speed at which things are happening in our world, you're going to have to be a very different leader than the folks who have led in the last 40 years, myself included.
Wonderful advice, Michèle. Thank you so much for so generously sharing your suggestions and your experience with us. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Isn't Michèle fantastic? I enjoyed that conversation even more than I anticipated. And like I said at the beginning, I didn't really know Michèle and I didn't know where the conversation was going to go, but I know she provided us with so much gold. So here are 3 things before we go that I want to reinforce in terms of my learnings and things that I hope you'll remember from this episode. They are feedback, the power of your network, and some networking suggestions. And the third thing is about your leadership style. So in terms of feedback, this, I would say, really was the main theme, at least for me, from this conversation. Michèle provided us with a fantastic example of how proactively seeking feedback and then being self-reflective on that feedback can really catalyze and advance your career. I don't think I could put that any more clearly. And Michèle's example, as I say, is the epitome of this. So instead of avoiding feedback, seek it out proactively and act on it. That's number 1. Number 2 is about strategic networking. Michèle spoke at the beginning about creating a personal board of directors around her. And I've talked about this in past episodes and with other guests about the research and the power of having mentors and also sponsors or champions or advocates. Michèle encourages us to also add a third role to our network, and that's allies. And I know many of us do this sort of serendipitously, maybe less strategically. We make friends with people at work, but she advocates that we not only have these champions or advocates and these mentors, but also peers and allies that we can count on in our network to help us grow and improve. Back to the feedback theme, right? The third thing that I want to reinforce with you is about leadership style. So a couple things here. Michèle described explicitly how there's been this paradigm shift from the authoritarian dictator type leader to a more authentic and open style of leadership. She also talked about being true to your own style. She mentioned a couple times that once she realized what her true leadership style was, she decided to embody it, whether the organization respected that or not. And fortunately, it did. I would say fortunately for her and fortunately for McDonald's Canada. I loved her line, "Do not mistake my kindness for weakness." Yes, you can lead a high-performing organization. You can be productive. You can meet all of your business goals. You can be strong, but also be kind. Make no mistake. I love this leadership style, and I'm optimistic that the world is evolving to a place where this kind of leader is highly valued. That's it for this episode of the Talk About Talk podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear your comments. I'd also love it if you subscribe. Whatever platform you're on, whether it's Spotify or Apple or YouTube, wherever you're listening, just hit subscribe and you won't miss any episodes. Thanks for listening and talk soon.